Perseus and Medusa. We know that Medusa was a very beautiful young woman, truly beautiful, a priestess, who one day profaned the temple of Athena. Athena is the goddess of wisdom. Remember that all of this exists within you. The profanation, the wisdom, everything is within you. You are Perseus here, the hero. The hero is always you. So Perseus receives a mission, because since this lady was punished by Athena, the goddess of wisdom, her hair turned into serpents and her gaze could turn people to stone, and someone would have to defeat her. And Perseus receives this mission, but it is extremely difficult, isn't it? Because how can you defeat a being who, if you look at her, turns you to stone, with those venomous serpents trying to draw your attention and you running such a risk? And then he receives a shield from Athena, a sword, and Athena guides his hand in the final blow. When he cuts off Medusa's head, his hand is guided by Athena, in other words, by wisdom. He only defeats Medusa because his hand is guided by wisdom, which is represented by Athena. He does not allow himself to be guided by anything else, but only by Athena. Now, a word of advice for you all. Once again, I want to draw your attention. Be careful. Do not assume that things are always this way. I am very wary of us falling into those little dream dictionaries you find at newsstands. In other words, thinking that this always means that. There is nothing that always means the same thing. Each circumstance must be analyzed individually, but it is common to find hair associated with thought, with mental forms. It is not uncommon. Take Rapunzel, for example. Her hair was only used by the witch to climb up. What do you think Rapunzel was thinking about? Isolated in her tower, which represents her personality, her physical body, what could ascend through her mental forms? Until the moment she exhausts that experience and begins to sing, her soul singing and attracting the spiritual self, which is the prince who breathes life through her hair. Anyway, I won't tell that whole story now. But hair is a very familiar symbol. It is very common for it to represent thought, isn't it? It is the thought of a being that petrifies, in other words, petrifying thoughts that prevent the human being. Because what does it mean to petrify? Isn't it to prevent you from moving, from walking, from growing? Do we have any thoughts that petrify us? That keep us from being guided by wisdom, that leave us inert, that immobilize us? See if you recognize anything like this within yourselves. Medusa's strands of hair, petrifying thoughts, are often not even our own. We copy and paste them from the collective, yet we keep following them as if they were a dogma, a law throughout our lives. And they are commonly regarded by society as truths. And generally, these are petrifying elements, things from the realm of Medusa, aren't they? I've listed a few simple examples. Don't think that this exhausts the subject in any way. These are just a few possibilities to help engage your imagination. Medusa's hair. If I don't commit to anything, I will be free. What do you think about that? You will become a slave to the worst kind of cause there is, which is alienation. And you will be enslaved by every possible collective form, and you will have no safe harbor to save you from the collective, which should be your own ideals, your own dreams, your own choices. A person becomes free when they commit to their dreams, because then they gain a safe harbor, which gives them a sense of direction and prevents them from being tossed about in every direction. So, one of the most paralyzing thoughts is to believe that freedom is the absence of commitment, and thus, one does not commit to life, does not commit to humanity, does not commit to oneself, in other words, becomes a plaything of circumstances. One does not truly live, but merely survives, right? If I am not stressed, it means I haven't worked hard enough. Have you ever seen this? That person who, if they don't feel like they're caught up in the whirlwind of endless busyness, thinks they're being lazy. You walk into their workspace, and there has to be a pile of papers on the desk, a mountain of things to do, total chaos. If they're calm, with a clear desk, doing one thing at a time, what a slacker. I wish I had a job like that. And, in truth, a stressed person is not efficient at all. There is an equation in human life. When emotions spiral out of control, the mind plummets. A stressed person is, by nature, inefficient. And beyond being inefficient, they also make everyone around them stressed and inefficient as well. In other words, a machine of inefficiency. But there is this idea that if a person isn't driven to madness, They aren't productive. Right? Yet another petrifying idea, because no one achieves anything that way. If I don't lose my patience, I can't get things done. I go there, I shout, I bump into things, I rant, I pound the table, then I get things done. Then everyone finds themselves in a delicate, high-pressure situation, everyone is stressed, and you end up at the very end of the line, because no one is there to put up with people who are stressed out, right? That's usually what happens. It's like that moment when you arrive at the airport and they've sold more seats on the plane than there are spots available. The one who loses their patience usually ends up at the very end of the standby line and resolves nothing, because the poor employee, it wasn't their fault. Isn't that so? In other words, if I don't lose my patience, I can't get things done. If I'm not always worried, I won't find solutions to my problems. So if I have a problem, I have to walk around with a scowl all day, because otherwise I am an irresponsible. Imagine someone facing a problem, yet I'm here with a pleasant expression. People see that as reckless. So, what happens then? You spend the whole day caught in circular mental patterns, tense, unable to find answers to anything. When I teach time management courses and encourage people to plan their time, many times people approach me with this issue. I couldn't stick to my schedule because I have a very serious problem and spent the whole day thinking about it. I said, all right, tomorrow, set aside 1 hour just to think about this problem and do nothing else. From 7 to 8, I will sit down, I will do nothing, and only think about this problem. If after an hour of thinking you haven't found a solution, it means that thinking alone isn't enough. I will do something else. Do you see? Otherwise, you fall into a trap of circular mental patterns that lead nowhere and gradually become obsessive. Right? If I don't keep people physically around me as much as possible, it means I don't love them. So, do you love someone who isn't here tonight? Oh, what a shame. If you had stayed glued to that person's side, you would be doing something for them. Here, learning to become a better human being, to grow, you're supposedly not doing anything for them. As Plato would say, the best thing you can do for the people you love is to grow, because only then can you truly offer them something meaningful. Being glued to them at home, in front of the television, would that really be better for them than you learning something that makes you more human? Would it really be? Pause to reflect, question things. We are trying to be philosophers, aren't we? In other words, realize that these are like Medusa's snakes, guaranteed to petrify us. And there is only one way to overcome this, with the hand of wisdom, that is, by upholding principles that we consider noble, just, and good above all else. No, I will not accept this kind of thing. I will not think this way, and I will not make decisions based on that. Do you see that when you impose these principles, you are being guided by the hand of wisdom? By the hand of Athena. This is how you cut off Medusa's head. And when you cut off Medusa's head, who is it that comes flying out from within? Who here knows their mythology? Who knows? Pegasus. In other words, you take flight. You grow wings. Perseus grabs hold of him and, whoosh, takes off into the sky. When you manage to paralyze Medusa, to cut off her head, to sever those petrifying thoughts, guided by the hand of wisdom. This too is a long story that never seems to end, and I will also share just a tiny piece of it, which is the story of Prometheus, Epimetheus, and Pandora. Prometheus means the one who thinks ahead, and Epimetheus, the one who thinks afterwards. Prometheus is also another long tale. He had done something that did not please Zeus very much, and the god of gods was a bit angry with him. So then Zeus decides to punish humanity in order to, evidently, punish Prometheus himself, and he orders the creation of a marvelous, perfect woman, Pandora. And he commands that this woman come to earth with a box in her hand. Some say, perhaps, that it was not a box but a jar, but in any case, that detail is not important here. She arrives in the world bearing something sealed, and when she appears, so beautiful, her brother Epimetheus immediately falls in love with her apparent beauty, so dangerous and tempting. He falls in love at once, and Prometheus warns him, look, be careful. You need to examine things more closely before getting involved. You can't be so impulsive, but Epimetheus only thought after the fact. He did not think beforehand. No, come on. You're just jealous because she liked me and not you. Look, be careful. Take it slow. No, what are you talking about? I'm going to marry her. Well, all right. But don't let her open that blessed object she brought with her, because that's dangerous and suspicious. All right, leave it to me. But evidently, Epimetheus was not one to think much about what he did, and so he marries her, becomes careless, and Pandora goes and opens that box or that jar, whatever it may be. From inside, all the evils of the world come out, right? Of course, this story is complex and has a number of other connotations, but this detail, how many evils have we already unleashed in our own lives simply by thinking only after the fact? Then, or not? How many times have we released harmful elements into our lives out of impulsiveness by only thinking afterwards? How many losses of time, of space, of opportunities, of life itself, simply because we only thought afterwards? Impulsiveness. Have you never closed doors in your own lives by only thinking afterwards? Only the next day? Impulsiveness, after the milk has already been spilled. Many times, right? So, what conclusion can we draw from all of this? Myths are lived. It is our own lives that are being narrated there. In other words, here we have keys that, if we learn to believe they are keys and learn how to use them, can open many human doors for us. Even though we live in a society that does not believe it has anything to learn from myths, we possess an entire heritage of traditions that did believe we can learn from myths and use them to build ourselves. Not only to build things, but to build human beings, which is certainly the greatest and most noble product of human life. We did not come here to make things, we came to make ourselves. And myths are good recipes for that. In other words, the idea was to give a small initial push to help you realize that life is symbolic, and everything that is symbolic holds the potential for communication. We can learn from all the great symbols of humanity,